Hey, I'm Warren Potts with the Elementary Science Department of Winston-Salem, Forsyth County Schools, and we're here at the STEM Lab at Petrie Elementary School, Project Lead the Way School. And Steve is on the camera again, helping video, and we appreciate Brad Rue and Mrs. Bailey for us being able to be here today. And we are going to be getting into the organisms kit to help us teach standards first grade 1L1 and 1L2, thinking about organisms and what they need, and also that includes thinking about their food and also the other nutrients that both animals and plants need. So this is going to be just a quick overview of the setup, and then we can go into some further details before. We're going to have another video that shows when you first get the organisms how to acclimate them, but this is just kind of getting more into the kit and some of the parts of the kit, especially the beginning. And so one of the things that we're going to do in the beginning is we're going to have a lesson on the plants, because they do take a while for them to kind of grow, and of course, you know, us to follow that growth of the plants. And so the 4 seeds that come in the kit is pumpkin, sunflower, kidney beans, and peas. And you do not want to tell your students what they are first yet. You want them to use their senses and explain things that they already know about seeds and the planting process, because we're going to relate that to what is it that seeds need and what do plants need to be able to grow. And so when you get into this unit, there is some flexibility if you're wanting to do just a whole class growth or planting the planters and implanters for your seeds. There's a larger planter too, or you can use these individuals, or you can use these cups. With the cups, you're going to take the seed on the outside when you get to that point, and so each cup has the seeds that you planted, and you're planting 2 in each of these cups just by putting some holes on the side and trying to drop those seeds on the side that correspond with what you've taped on the outside. Typically, you want to soak your seeds for about 24 hours too. That's going to help with the planting process, and they're just a little bit below the surface, and you want to make sure that they're covered up with some of that soil too. So they're just a little bit below the surface. There is some tips too with the in the teacher's guide, the organisms teacher's guide. We'll show that guide again in a second here. And so they're just planting them here on the sides. You can just use a pencil. And here's the sunflower seeds that is going in. And I'm just covering up just a little bit of the top. And putting them in on the sides again. And our last ones are the pumpkins. And this is a great thing that you can do too, is have your students arrange them in size. Which ones are the largest? There is a probe that talks about how these plants are going to compare in size once they grow. So getting your students to talk and write and draw. Of course, we know that our plants are going to need constant water, so make sure that you have a way to water our plants. This soil is actually a little bit dry that I use. You want to have some soil that's a little bit more damp or moist, and but not soaking wet, because you want to work on having the correct amount of water. And also, you need to keep in mind too the sunlight that your school or your class receives. There's some guidance on thinking about eastern, southern ways that your classroom direction that your classroom is facing, and that kind of will have some effect on what kind of sunlight you get in your classroom. So these are set. Of course, I need to water them. They've been planted, and that's something that you can have a student have as a job to continually to water and keep up with, or you can have your groups be responsible for watering of their plants too. So that's something we're going to get started. It takes between 5 and 10 days for most of these seeds to germinate. So before you see anything really growth-wise happening with these seeds, it takes about 5 to 10 days. So that is kind of the setup for our plants that will move into recording and having students record growth. after the germination process, so you don't need to have them record any growth at 5 to 10 days because nothing's growing. But they should still be using their observations and their senses in the recording of that. So now we're going to move on to kind of the setup, a quick down and dirty setup of our terrarium and our aquarium. Those are because we're going to have, of course, the fish, snails, and then we're going to have millipedes and the isopods or pill bugs. And something that you're going to need to make sure to collect is some leaves, some leaf matter. This actually goes in the setup of the terrarium. And then also you can put some of this on the top and some sticks on the top for our plants. And so the setup of our terrarium, Steve, you'll come in and I just want to show, this is kind of the difference between the different soils. This is a little too dry, and you may even have soil that's even more dry than this. So I want to add just a little bit of water until I can start to get it that it's moist. This, it feels even softer. It's clumping together a little bit, but I can't squeeze any water out of it. So this is a good soil that's been kind of reconditioned so that we can use this for our terrarium. And so with our terrarium, turning to our section on that, it's in lesson 4, and again, this is the STC Organisms book that I'm using. And we have some newer editions. This was one of our older editions. And of course, we have this online too, with a lot of other resources like our STC reader that I call her, the literacy series that accompanies this. And this is found online with CarolinaScienceOnline.com. And we have directions to that on our Canvas page. And so setup of this first. And so it shows in the picture, depending on what copy you have, shows the smaller tank. But I recommend definitely for the use with the terrarium that we're using this larger gallon tank. This I think is the 5 gallon. I think this is the 5 gallon tank. 1.5. 1.5? Yeah, that makes sense. 5 gallons would be a lot. So this is the 1.5 gallon. Our level. What we're doing first is we're going to add a layer of gravel. Sorry about that.
Okay.
And so this is kind of helps with our drainage so that the water can kind of go to the bottom. And so that should be good. Maybe a little bit more. So it says about a ½ inch. This might not be a ½ inch, but I don't want it too close to the top when I'm done with all this because our millipedes do like to climb, and so we'll give you some tips too on trying to help prevent that climbing of your millipede too. And so then I'm going to use, so that's at about a half inch of gravel. I'm a little less than that, but that's okay. I do want to have a lot of soil for as much as I can. So now we're going to put in our soil. And this is something you really want your students to be participating with your buildup of your terrarium, of your habitat for your millipedes, because this is something that all living things need. They need space, including our plants. And so they need to be a part of this, even if you're doing it in steps and it goes slow, that's okay. You need to have your students a part of this. And so now we're going to add, it says about up to 2 inches of soil. And so I'm gonna take from our moist soil here until that I have a nice lot layered. Oh, and before we do that, also we have some of our leaves that we're going to use. That collected from the backyard and in a little pile in the corner of the backyard. So I'm ripping it up just a little bit. I do want to cover our gravel at the bottom. Rocks or gravel, because that's what they are. They're smaller rocks. And from your study from the last standard of 1E2, I think it is, with the soils, we should have some good connections here.
All right, so we
just added the leaves to the top of the gravel. The gravel's there for runoff, or really for helping drainage with any of the water that we're putting into our habitat for the terrarium. And this will be, when we're finished, this will be where our millipedes and our pill bugs or isopods go, and our moss and our pine seedling. And so now I'm going to add some soil, and one side is going to be higher than the other. And so I'm putting that directly over the leaves here. And you don't need to really, pat it down too much, but move it around so that you have a nice layer of coverage of the soil over the leaves. And then I'm gonna build one side up so that's a little bit higher than the other side. And that should be good, because this is about 2 inches, and I think that's about 2 inches. If you want to grab a ruler, you can. And I'm just eyeing it a little bit. And so now we've got, it's kind of like a baking show. Now we've got a good coverage of our soil over our gravel and our leaves. And let's put that over here. And so we're going to have another video that kind of shows what all of the living, including our moss and our pine seedling, looks like. But I combined it into one holding pin that I'm going to continue to make sure I wet and keep wet for the plants. And so this is kind of what it comes in as in one clod of moss. And this is kind of cool. There's some different types of things that are growing in this, and sometimes we'll have some insects that are in this as well, and that's okay. And what the book says is to break that up, and you're going to put that in different spots of your habitat. And you can, depending on how many habitats that you're creating, and if you're wanting to spread this out, you could just kind of use like 3 small pieces, or even 1 small piece, and then your pine seedling too. The pine seedling is going to go on that taller part, because the roots will need some area to grow. And this is what our pine seedling looks like again. And so you can see that the roots are quite long compared to the size of the plant right now. And that's a kind of a neat observation. And so we'll put that into the soil on the higher end. And we're going to continue to water that. That is probably the thing that goes wrong the most, is just forgetting to water our plants and making sure that they got enough moisture and that they have enough light. And so check out. You may have to work it out that you're shifting this terrarium a little bit to get the best light, but not too much light that it's drying out your plants and your organisms, your isopods and your millipedes. So this is just a holding pin that we're using. This is our habitat now, and this is looking really good. We're going to put some sticks. We would put some more leaves in here too, because one of the things that our isopods and our millipedes eat is decaying plants. And so that's, they're great for our environment because they are breaking down that. So I could put a couple little sticks. You could have this, your kids collect the sticks that you're putting in some leaves if there's any in your school playground. Please remember to make sure that you're keeping safety in mind when you're handling the insects and you're looking around. We're not going to pull things from your schoolyard like insects to add to this, because we have a balance with our ecosystems, and we're going to try to practice good what is it called again? Stewardship of our outdoors. And so this is great, and this is where we could get this from Carolina Biological and through our science funds. And so now we have this set up. We can just leave this as it is for a little while and to observe and talk about, and then we're going to be adding some of our insects, or actually our isopods and our pill bugs, or that is our pill bugs and our millipedes. This is kind of another finished product of our terrarium. And this has got a lot more moss than I probably would normally put, but I had a little bit of extra. And I threw that paper towel in there. That's, you don't need to do that, but that just helps provide another bit of moisture. I did put some screen on the top. You may want to find that you do that. And I'm taping the sides because the millipedes do want to find a way out of this. And so taping the side in a way that you can undo the tape kind of easily is great. I've put a little extra leaves in here, and it's kind of cool. We've got a really, really nice one here. If you have your students handling the millipedes, if we get to a point where we can share the handling of it, or if you just want one kid on one day to handle and then wait a couple of days before you have another kid handle it, please also let your kids wear a glove. That'll help with our safety too, which I don't have right now. But this is one of our millipedes. This is a longer millipede that we get. They're usually a little bit smaller than this. So we would add a millipede or two at the most to our habitat. And it's going to be a little bit of a trouble to find our pill bugs because they're really good hiders. And if they're not out already, you'll have to kind of search around to try to find our pill bugs. That's why it's nice when they're already in the container. You just leave them in the container for a little while until you need them. So I can't find my pill bugs around here. But let's just pretend I put some of the pill bugs in here. And so they're both using the same habitat. And we can talk about that, what is it that they may both still eat, and we're going to look for observations of what they're eating. What do they leave behind? They leave behind some poop and pee, and you can sometimes see little pellets that they leave behind. It's more for the millipede than the pill bugs because the pill bugs are so small. So I did throw in some lettuce, and so you want to have a little lettuce on hand. Even a little dry piece of dog food is okay too. I've got a little bit of spinach too that I'm putting in there just for a little extra. Even a little bit of cut up sweet potato is good too. So that ends our really the building of our terrarium. That is for our land habitat for our millipedes and our pill bugs. And again, this should be built over time and kind of stages with your students' help. Either they're telling you what to add next, or you're learning about the different parts. For the fish or the aquatic habitat, it's fairly simple. We're just adding gravel really to the bottom, and we're making sure that we have water that has been acclimated. And so the gravel we're using usually about 2 to 3 cupfuls of gravel, and those directions again are in your teacher's guide. And then also we'll add the aquatic plants and then the aquatic snails and the guppies too to that. So this is our gravel, and just to be able to show you real quick what 2 to 3 cupfuls of gravel, how much that is. There's one, and I think I'm actually going to end it with just 2. Yep, 2, and 2 is enough. One trick that you can do to try to not stir up a lot of dust from the gravel is laying a sheet of paper over your gravel and then pouring in some of your acclimated water. Or you can even use a paper towel. We'll use that. Another thing you can do too is if you want to rinse your gravel before using that will also get some of the debris and kind of the gravel dust, I'm calling it, off. So I'm just pouring it directly over, and you can see it's kind of neat that it's not kicking up any of that dust that could be on the gravel. And then when I'm done, I'm just going to pull this off, and now we have some nice clean water, and that's been acclimated. It's been sitting out for a while that we can add to that, and then we can go ahead and put in the 2 different types, one of each of the 2 different types of aquatic plants, and then add our snails and our guppies. We'll go ahead and show you what our holding pen looks like for our snails And our guppies, so this is our holding tank again for our guppies and our snails. This is one order, which is about 16 guppies and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, about 16 snails too. Just for some providing that just some coverage for our plants. I did throw in a Kimboba, I think that's the name of it. This plant here, which is really cool. It's like a pom-pom. And then you put it in the water and it just kind of spreads out. And this is Lodia or Elodia. And that goes back in the water too. And I'll usually just put about maybe 2 fish and a snail, up to 2 snails per aquatic habitat. And that will be a great way to make your aquatic habitat. And of course, we're doing this in stages as well too, to have conversations and record and talk to your students about building that aquatic habitat. So this was just a quick overview of organisms for first grade, 1L1 and 1L2. And again, reference your teacher's guide for the steps and what to use. And remember, there's lots of different ways for your students to record, including drawing and labeling, and also creating some diagrams. And remember to science notebook with your students as we're doing this. Thanks for joining us today. And remember, with WSFCS Science Department, we do science well.